We are almost. Okay, I think we are good. We are almost. Yep. All right. So today, we've got plenty with the light with the sun still out. Darcy's here to kind of give us an update about what's been going on with food service. There's always been a lot of questions about what's going on, and I don't have the answers because it's changing daily. We were chatting before the meeting about there's webinars almost every other day about waivers and changes and what you can do, what you can't do. We have a completely new way of reporting our financials to the state, which they're just rolling out. So they spent $1 million on this new program, which we're all trying to learn. It's just it's kind of crazy. We're basically still running the summer food program, which they instituted about a year ago, instead of our regular federal lunch program. And to me, the advantage is, and to Darcy too, it's an easier program to run. It's got more. It's not as limited as the federal school lunch program, and it actually reimburses us for more than our cost of food. So it actually starts reimbursing for part of our labor, which the federal school lunch program really didn't do a whole lot of. So if you took a quick peek at the financials, you'll see that actually year to date or through March, we're actually running a surplus in the food service given our subsidy. It's still a deficit, but we're not, we've only used probably 2/3 of our subsidy that we subsidize the food service with our own general fund. So
wait, I didn't follow that at all.
So we subsidize our food service program by $300,000 a year. So we basically transfer $30,000 a month, 10 months a year, from September through June. And so I'm still doing that transfer, but with that transfer, we are running we're about $43,000 ahead as of March 31st. We were $87,000 behind same time last year. And we actually, last year, in the last 3 months, we received enough subsidy to turn that $87,000 into a small gain. So I suspect that the next 3 months we'll still see bigger increases. So we may see another $40,000 added to that.
And what are we normally subsidizing? So we're normally subsidizing the full 300,000. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And
Well,
so this year,
but that's not the budget for the food service. That's just
that's just the operating deficit that we budget for to support the food service program.
and so the report that you sent us, this never shows up in the expenditure budget that we see. The only thing that shows up is that $300,000 transfer. Is that correct?
The transfer out, yes. So it shows up as income in this report. This is where that money goes.
And so does that money go back into the contingency, or what happens to it?
Well, I think the food service as a whole still is running a deficit. So this will probably be able to balance that to zero at the end of this fiscal year. The idea is that we, as a matter of bookkeeping, to make sure all of our funds have a non-negative budgetary fund balance. And I think that at the end of this year, we'll be able to do that.
Wait, so, okay, so we're usually running the $300,000 deficit, and then we have an additional deficit? So we have 300 from the general fund.
300,000 has not covered it in some years. Some years it does, and some years it doesn't.
So
Um,
what is our current? Because
I don't
is
have
this treated like a reserve fund?
I don't have that right now. It's an enterprise fund that's run like its own business.
Okay.
So in terms of budgeting for next year, we did the same thing with food service that we did with everything else. This is a status quo budget. I didn't even put one forward. It's just because it's so dependent on what we do in school, and it's so dependent on how much food we buy. And this is the one part of that budget that's really driven by, this is running a business. This is our $1 million restaurant, and it's cost of food and cost of labor in a restaurant is generally 85% of your total sales. Our cost of food plus our cost of labor is generally about 115%, actually 120% of our sales. So it's a built-in loss.
And why is that?
Benefits, we have we have high labor costs. Our cost of foods are actually cost of goods is actually in line with what I would expect to see in a restaurant. But our labor is 30 points higher than you would expect to see, primarily because not the wages, it's the benefits.
I guess I'm confused as to why we just don't budget this $300,000 into the budget.
We do.
But why don't we budget what we actually need to cover it, even if we're having to do that on a trailing basis?
The 300 usually has been a good estimate in some years,
So why do we have a deficit?
because we had a couple bad, 2019, we ran a big deficit. Again, the same thing that happened in labor in the contracts in 18 and 19 happened in this too. I'll get to that number, but this, we've slowly, not slowly, we actually took it from the subsidy back when John and I started was, I think, under $100,000, might have been $80,000 a year, and they would just continue to run deficit after deficit after deficit.
Mhm.
The reason why I got my job was because the deficit was hidden.
Yeah.
So we've tried to, over the years, get to the point where that we came up with a number that was an appropriate number to allow us to provide nutritious meals to the students. And 300,000, worked more or less. And I think it will continue to work, but it's an estimate.
So why are we putting in 125 to a contingency for food service if we are comfortable with the $300,000 number?
Where's that 125,000? Oh, in the article? Well, that can go anywhere. That was one place it could go was food service, but that's actually could go anywhere. The way the article's written, that could be transferred to any other article.
So we're creating a $125,000 slush fund contingency then.
There's no slush fund. It's $100,000 that would have to be transferred, but with board approval to be used. That would have to be a budget transfer.
Okay, if it's not for food service, I have a bunch of questions on contingency later, so I'll save any questions I have on contingency. Because it sounds like it's not relevant to the food service conversation. Is that accurate?
Yes. So Darcy, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on, what you've been doing and what you're planning on for the summer? I think that's kind of the questions that will be coming up.
Okay, well, basically, what I've been doing is using up the commodities that we had in our freezer. Um, there was a lot of product there from years gone by. Evidently, they were writing a menu and then ordering food to fit the menu, like Peter just said. So they wanted to have chicken nuggets, they would buy chicken nuggets and run it on the menu. Well, we didn't do that this year. We looked to see what we had, and we've used what we had. Um, where we've got to put a big dent, a good dent in our commodities. So when I placed my order for commodities this year, um, what I did is I took some money you're allowed to put in a DOD, which is actually a fruit and vegetable program. So I put $20,000 in that program, and that allows us to order fruits and vegetables from a vendor throughout the year. We don't have to store them; they come each week, and then we can take that money that we normally would have had into meat or commodity type foods, and we can use that to buy chicken nuggets. And so instead of buying our apples, we're gonna buy chicken nuggets so the kids will eat, things like that. What we did, well, I know we hired Tim Pierce. He's a chef from Somerset. He's our kitchen manager at South School. He's doing an awesome job on taking that diced chicken and making it into different types of things so that the students would want the items, variety. His style of cooking is batch cooking, and things are not overcooked. Product is much better. We've done a lot of improvements on things like that. He also cooks anything that's left over at the course of the day, like at South School, just as extra. You got 5 extra meals, they just go in the trash. It's not. That's what they were doing before. They were just throwing it away. And now we have programs. We have the after school program gets supper. So we're able to take those extra 5 meals, label them, freeze them, and send them out to students on this the after school program. There's 40 students who get supper and a snack. So that has been able to utilize a lot of our waste product that we've had before and put that into a place where we're actually getting money or subsidy for that.
Can
We
you just jump
also,
in and say supper is one of the best things we've ever done in our district. Those
Yeah.
kids, I bet you anything, they just really, really need that supper. That without us, not much would happen.
yeah,
Just one of the best things we do.
yeah, it is. And we also are doing a weekend program for the preschool students. Um, I tried to pick audiences that I knew would, if we made the food, they would take the food. And so that's how we kind of started with doing it for pre-K, preschool program, the Penquist program. And so that has actually, between those 2 programs, that's actually brought our subsidy up quite a bit for that. And during February vacation, we did both groups. And during April vacation, we sent out 7-day packs. So that's really helped. The pizza party at the high school, and Bill just contacted me about trying to send food home for the junior high, which we tried before and it wasn't real successful. But I was at the high school today. I've had my 2 shots, so I can go anywhere now. So I was at the high school today talking to some people about trying to figure out how we can be sending more food for their students home and getting more kids to come in and eat. Maybe ordering pizzas online. Kids can go on their phone and order pizza to be able to take home with them on Tuesdays and Fridays, or maybe even at lunchtime. In the morning at 10 o'clock, they can order their pizza, and you cook up little pan pizza, and they pick up their own pizza. It's like something way cooler than what's going on right now. So those are some of the things that we're looking at doing. For finishing out the end of the year. I'd like to try that program at least for a few weeks in May and June, just to see how it works and see how the kids like it, and then we'll know next year, if that's a program that we want to continue or if the kids are interested. And other goal is to hire a new person at the high school that's more of a not a institutional cook so much as maybe like a short order sandwich shop production person that could actually cook. So the way I talked to Jesse, and they're looking at having a longer lunch period, which would allow kids to come in at a good pace, whether we're doing COVID related school or we actually have 5 days and all the kids are there, we'd still be able to have kids come in the cafeteria, maybe order a sandwich right in, like Subway. You'd have a Subway station, a Domino's station, and all these. They have the stations now, or they had the stations when I got here, but they weren't utilizing them to actually, be what the kids really want, and making things like to order. So the kids are like in charge of what they're eating and stuff. They can, right now we're doing a hot bar at the high school. So a student can get a hamburger, nachos, they can get a baked potato. Some days they can get pasta, and then they have all these toppings they can put on it. So now a student can go in through the line every day, and even though there's the same similar foods in the hot bar, they can get 20 different things. You can get a hamburger with cheese sauce on it if you want. You can get cheese sauce on your fries. You can get a jalapenos on your chicken burger if you want to, or you can make nachos, or it gives them a lot of flexibility on things they can get, and the kids really like that. So I want to do that with salads. I want to do that with sandwiches, and so the students can actually they won't make it themselves, but somebody will make for them. And I think that and the other thing is to try to get more adults to come in to eat, and that would give us a money stream if we had adults coming in to eat too. So Peter touched a little bit on the summer program that we're doing right now is going to go until June 2022. So we've got a whole year of being able to utilize this extra subsidy amount for each meal, and being able to actually, I think the waiver even came through that we can send meals home on weekends throughout the whole year. And that's key, like vacations and weekends, because that's money you never would get otherwise. So if we can have staff or volunteers help us pull those together. I pulled together a menu so that we sent home lettuce and tomatoes and cucumbers and chicken and ground beef and tacos and hamburger buns, and so they could make their own. There was a whole basket of food that parents or students could make their meals for the week, and it was pretty successful. I had volunteers come in and do it with just me, because I didn't want my staff to have to do more work, and it was pretty awesome how it went. And that's a good program to try to push.
Great.
If we can get more people.
Mhm.
And summer school will just try to be using, one of the disadvantages of summer school is most of the sites are going to want their to-go meals, like a sandwich, so that the kids can go outdoors and eat, or they can go on go somewhere else to learn, or things like that. So it makes it a little more difficult on what you can give them for sandwiches, and meals to go. But we'll still be using up our commodities and getting rid of the trailer eventually, the freezer trailer, or we'll get our new freezer by then, Peter. That would be nice. So any questions?
Can you talk a little bit about some of the partnerships that we have with, I'm thinking in particular, I think it's the food pantry that does the backpack program and things like that. And I know that they're doing a lot of stuff over at the food pantry. And I'm not sure if you've had a chance to have any conversations because COVID, but I'm just curious if there are any existing programs or if we're thinking about some.
I've tried to partner with different people, and actually the backpack program is dear to my heart. We're not able to do that because they have their guidelines, and they can't accept help or collaboration from us, basically. That's kind of where that went. And some of the other partnerships, like buying from farmers and some of those types of things, I would love to do, but it's with everything that's going on, it was one more piece, and it was just made it too many pieces. And so, I mean, the apples we get are local to Maine. They're just not local to right here. Some of the fruits and vegetables that we get come from different parts of Maine, and so it's really hard. And basically, that's just we're shorthanded in this fall when everything started coming back, and it was just too many things. Like we're able to, or we actually can order from as many vendors as we want, but it gets more confusing because now this didn't come in on this one, and then I got to get it. Whereas if you order from the same vendor all the time, you just you know what days it's coming in, you know what you can get for them, you know what the quality is. It's it makes it a lot easier, but we really can't do that. I found that out with my procurement review.
We met, a year ago a lot with Joe Ryan when he first took his job over at the food pantry, because we were trying to figure out how we could get food to families in a way that they could use it, which would be more like grocery bags instead of individual applesauce cups. And we were sending home dozens and dozens of little milk boxes instead of a gallon of milk. So we worked with him until the DOE finally changed its regulations that allowed us to do it ourselves. But we were trying to figure out, how, and they were trying to put together, meal plans that a family could follow for a week, and we could send the food home for that. And so we made every effort to do that, and there were great ideas, but the federal programs caught up to what was really going on.
Are you seeing less waste now that you're kind of making this thing?
I think on the high school level, we probably are. I'm at South School. That's where my office is. So that's where I see more of what's going on or whatever. We're actually doing a bagged lunch, and a lunch consists of 5 components, and there's offer versus serve. But if you're putting it into a bag and giving it to a child, they have to take all 5 things, except they can choose to take or not take milk. They don't have to take the milk with it. So, if you had a line, a student would be able to choose on whether they wanted the vegetable or the fruit. Or they could take a fruit and then, no, because they'd still have to take their meat and their grain. So,
I have Doug calling in, so let me see what's going on with him.
What do we do for vegetarians and vegans or people who are gluten-free, particularly if they have to take a meat?
We don't have any.
No.
We don't have, we at the high school level we do, and the junior high, and they're able to do salads, and they're able to do hummus and things like that. So there's a limited amount of, they can do cheese, they can do egg. Well, vegan can't do egg, but I mean, there are other choices that they can. At the high school, there's so many choices that somebody who's gluten-free can do corn chips, and they can do a baked potato, and so it just really makes a lot of choices for them.
I think that's a good route, because if you have autonomy, you're going to be hopefully making the right healthy choices, and it sounds like you're making sure there's a good variety of healthy stuff there.
But we have kids at South School who are lactose intolerant, and so we offer product for them. And my staff is amazing about oh, Johnny, he can't have this, we need to do this, and making sure that there's something that they can have every day. So
Doug is listening in on my phone, by the way. Hope he can hear us.
Something that Darcy noticed was that we kept buying food for our menus, and we kept building up more and more stock and filling up our freezers with more and more food, but yet we keep buying the same things over again. And so she's been able to really, for this past year, cut down our cost of food by actually utilizing and creating menus around what we have, which is good stuff. There's burgers, and there was good proteins in there, I thought. So I think that, and then while she was trying to reduce that, the federal government is now throwing more at us, so much more that we actually had to rent a refrigerated truck to keep it, because otherwise it was going away. Otherwise we would lose it. And so there were districts all over the state that had all this food that they didn't even know what to do with. They can't even use it right now because everybody's participation's down. I'm going to a meeting tomorrow night where, another local district is going to have to add another $100,000 to their food service subsidy because they're not, everything's down.
What is our participation rate?
Well, I can't tell you because I'm not 100% sure how many kids we have enrolled, but Peter probably knows. But I know we're feeding 625 kids a month, roughly.
That's for in-school lunch or,
That's everything. That would be, but we're feeding like 5 kids at the site that comes and picks up meals for a week, and we're feeding, the pre-K classes and the after school and everything. So there's 40 after school kids who get 4 days, and the pre-K gets 2 days extra. So other than that, it's all kids who come to school to get food.
And high
So-
school's pretty low, isn't it?
Yeah, we're doing only 30 breakfasts, and about the highest number she's ever gotten was like 92, and that was last week. From 60 to 90. And then we have 15 to 20 kids who take home, eat on twice a week, that take home food or whatever. But I got a good suggestion today too, to try to utilize JMG kids to help us give out the food, because maybe kids would be less intimidated if it was kids giving out the food. And also doing both doors. With COVID, I haven't been able to come up and help them. And so it's just been really difficult to say, let's do more. So now that I can come up on Tuesdays and Fridays and help them pass out the food at 2 different doors instead of just one, or we can get a volunteer or something like that. Then that's gonna, if we do 30 more, that's gonna make a lot, because that 30 is actually 3 days of meals because they're not at school. So they're getting 3 lunches, 3 breakfasts for, each kid. So you're doing it for 30 kids, but that's 90 meals. So that's another day. Our high school participation wasn't very high to begin with.
How do we handle? Oh, are you unfrozen? Maybe. How do we handle unpaid accounts and things like that? Or are we even charging right now?
Well, there's no charge right now. Everybody gets free food. But I would love to see that go away, just so when we go back, we could start with nothing and then be more.
There goes the Thomaston internet.
Hey, new broadband coming soon. It's fun to try to figure out the syllables and see if you can piece them together. Pete, if we went to no charge, how would that impact the cost of the program?
John and I have talked about this a lot, and that was part of what we talked with Darcy when we were interviewing her about that idea, because it seems like at some point the benefit outweighs the cost, and it's going to be a cost. You can, if we receive, and we can really only do it at the high school because the K-8, I believe, has got to be part of the federal school lunch program. So the requirements would be there. We'd have to but the high school, I think we have the ability to disconnect from the federal school lunch program. But our federal, I don't have the whole year. But if we're gonna, we're receiving $500,000 a year in federal money. We'd have to somehow plan for that expense.
Wait, so if we take federal money, we have to charge students? Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Seriously?
I think so.
That seems incredibly messed up. Because the purpose is to.
Well, the
help
federal money is paying for the free lunches for some students, but it's only paying a portion of it and reduce costs for others. And we have to charge the other ones that don't qualify for the federal school lunch program.
Instead of just covering some of it locally and some of it with federal funds.
Yeah, it's all, if you take any federal money, the whole program is considered a federal program. Even local dollars are all considered federal dollars.
That's nice.
Yeah, I've learned that quickly. Year one, I think.
Same with highways.
Can the district just kick in and pay for those other kids?
We can, and obviously we would probably get a whole lot more participation. So just the sheer number of meals would increase. But could we make up for the fact that we could disconnect from the serving requirements, the offering requirements, offering food that the kids don't want to eat? Could we actually offer a serving size, a piece of protein that was more than a tiny piece of meat or some other protein that kids it's just not enough.
Yeah.
I mean, because of the calorie and the salt and the fat and all the requirements on the other pieces of the meal and the red vegetable and the whatever else things are a part of these meal plans, that by the time you get to the protein, which is the last thing on the list, there's no calories left for it. So some of our costs would go up. Some would go down because we wouldn't have to offer, the squash fries that nobody wants to eat or whatever else. That sounds gross to me.
Yeah, that's the other good thing about the summer program is you don't have to count the red, green, and you don't have to balance all that and everything else too.
But could we do it with less labor? I mean, I think there's an argument that we could probably do something.
I don't think so.
Hmm.
I mean,
we wouldn't have cash registers. So we spend a lot of money on people.
Yeah.
By cash. If you had an RFID ID, and you just kind of like they do. Darcy knows up at MSSM, the kids just walk in the cafeteria and they just swipe their card, and they count, and that's the count. And so
there's charge for whatever they take. It's a single charge. They can take whatever they want.
Well, that was just a count. It's all paid for. So everything's been put on hold for the last 2 years or year and a half, all these ideas. But I think we still want to pursue the concept of offering better food to more kids and locally sourced.
well, we took all the 25 cases of ground beef that was in the long tubes, like you get a 40-pound, whatever like that. And actually we're slicing it up and making hamburgers and it's making a nice big hamburger instead of giving them the little scrunch, because it's all food that needs to be used up, So, yeah. And at the high school level, we're giving them way more than their 1 or 2 ounces of protein. Because I tell them, feed the kids, give them something good to eat, because we've got all that food and it's not going to last forever. It's got to be used up. So a lot of that, we're trying to incorporate into different things for them. So.
What's the summer program look like again? It starts June 21st.
The high school is doing 3 weeks, 5 days a week, starting the 21st of June. And then the other grammar schools and middle school will start the 5th of, starting the 5th, Peter, because that's a holiday. Do you know?
I'm not sure.
I meant to ask Stephanie about that. I'll have to check with her. But they're supposed to go from the 5th to the 29th. They'll go 4 days a week for 4 weeks. And they're
you're
doing
providing 2 meals?
Yes. Yeah. And we'll do, there's going to be a site at every grammar school. And so instead of just having it South School.
Yeah, okay. Is there food going home with them in the summer program?
It's an option that we can do, but we got to figure out because they could actually, if they're there 4 days, they could actually take home food for 3 days. If it's something that somebody wants to coordinate, as far as my thing is, I can coordinate that we prepare it and it's
Yep.
ready, but
Yep.
I can't coordinate that takes it home.
Yeah.
So if I coordinate and make it, and we make 25, and then the teacher only gives it out to 10 kids, we've got these packs of food
hmm
that we can't, what do we do with? Yeah, so we have to break it down because it has fresh and it has dry and it has frozen. And so if I had somebody who was going to make, like, we do this pack on Tuesdays for Wednesday, because Wednesday's a teacher workshop, and we pack out so many for each classroom, and the teachers actually pass them out. So that's a big participation day for us, because the teachers actually pass them out to every kid in their class. Well, kid doesn't want it, they don't have to take it, but most of the kids will take it because the teacher's passing it out. So we could, definitely do something like that, but we have to have somebody on the other end that's gonna, help make sure the kids take it. And we can't send the food to Cushing, 10 packs to Cushing, and only 5 get taken, and then they got to bring the other ones back to where we're packing, and the logistic part on the other end has got to be solid, that the kids are actually taking it.
Just give the other 5 to Lauren.
To where?
To Lauren.
Me said, yeah. So, John, are our principals running the show at their schools in July?
No.
No, we have site coordinators,
Okay.
school,
So-
and then Stephanie and Neil are taking the first 2 weeks as sort of head administrators, and then I'm following up with the second 2 weeks.
Okay. Because the site coordinators might be able to know who's hungry and who's not. And I don't know if that helps you, Darcy, in this logistics, but obviously if we've got food and there are kids obviously hungry in the summer, the way we can meet that need to be great, but I respect what's feasible and what isn't.
It's hard to know because, like I said, we're still doing site meals. People can pick up a 5-day pack at South School on Thursday.
Mhm.
And we have one woman picks up 2 and one woman picks up 1. And we have one of our staff takes home a pack for her son.
Mm.
That's
And that's
all
it.
we're doing. That's it. Of
Yeah.
course, when we were delivering to everybody's home last June, March, April, May, June last year, we
Yeah.
were doing 525 because we were delivering it to their house.
As
And I
far as
think
we know, things were consumed.
Right. But yeah, you don't know. But I also think that the food pantries are doing a big job of distributing too. You can go to AIO or AOI, whatever it is, like any day of the week, or when they deliver, when they're open, and you can go more than once a week, anytime you need to go. And if they're not open, then Salvation Army's open.
I'd say through some of my patients that the food is like overwhelmingly huge. Like there's a lot of food that's being given out by
Yeah.
the countries and other organizations. So that's good.
Yeah. I went to pick up for somebody else. Somebody was on Facebook and said they needed food. And so I said, okay, well, I'll bring you food. And so I went to pick some up, and that you got toiletries, you got coffee, you got fresh fruits and vegetables, you got frozen meat, there was
Yeah.
bread. I mean,
You-
there was a big amount. So,
Okay.
you know,
Is this something that we want the site coordinators to pursue? And are the site coordinators current staff, or they're temporary hires?
No, they're all current staff. They're very, very familiar with the kids. So I would imagine they would be good contacts for that. So I can follow up on that without a problem.
Okay, thanks. Anything else for Darcy?
Thank you very much, Darcy, for everything.
Indeed. And I'm really happy to hear just making sure that we're really helping kids get healthy food and more of it. So I'm glad to hear a lot of the changes you're making.
I love it when
May not
you
hear.
talk. I love it when you talk about getting them some kind of an app or something so they can order food on their phone, because if you can get into their phones, you've got them. Then that's where they live.
Totally. Absolutely.
So that's awesome, and I love the idea of the order your own sandwich and the different bars and things. I think that's going to go a long ways. That's how we designed that kitchen at the high school in the first place.
I think everything we just said to Darcy, she didn't get.
Oh,
You have to watch the podcast.
that's all right. I'll say it to her again. I'll follow up with an email because she did a great job. I love some of the stuff I heard. I really did.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you, Darcy, for stopping by. What's up next, Pete?
So I just wanted to update. We went to bid for our lawn and sports fields. We had two bidders. One was our transportation director, Roy Groton, who bid. We split it up this year. We split it up a couple of years ago on just our regular once a week school lawns, and then we also have the all our sports fields, which are generally a lot more work and weather dependent, game dependent, usually cut 3 times a week.
We've already said goodbye to you, Darcy. But yeah, thanks for joining us. We had some really nice things to say that you didn't hear, unfortunately.
Yeah, we said
No,
great
I'm
things about
sorry.
you.
Blinked out there, sorry.
But John could fill you in, and
But thank you.
well, thank you.
Thanks, Darcy.
Put them in writing or something, send them to the newspaper or something.
You can watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, we'll send you a
Thank you.
YouTube link.
Yeah, right, good idea, thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
So we split it up a couple of years ago because really we split it up because the job on the fields was just not getting done, and it was never really a part of the bidding process for decades that the sports fields needed to get extra attention. They were just kind of just done as as everything else was, just like the front lawn of South School. So we split it up, and 2 years ago we had a bidder who came in for the sports fields, and we gave him a trial run. Brian Calderwood from South Thomaston. He did a great job. He's a parent. I think he's also he's very involved with RSU 13's athletics. So he's actually taken it to heart. He did a great job 2 years ago with the sports fields. This year, we did the bidding again. Roy bid on only the schools, and Brian bid on both the schools and the sports fields. And the way he constructed his bid, it was $10,000 a year lower than Roy's on the schools themselves, which was concerning because I think it was, it moved around some of the money was moved around a little bit. But after talking to Roy about the value, I think that they were within, if Roy was able to bid on the entire package, they were probably $2,000 apart, but Roy couldn't do it. And because of the way the bids were constructed, we offered the entire package to Brian Calderwood this year, and Roy is not doing our lawns for the first time in a couple of decades.
Wow.
Which I think is hard, but I think in some ways is a relief. I'm hoping that's the case, that he gets his weekends back. But I think it was the right thing to do. It was always a hard place for us to be in when an employee is also a contractor. It was actually one of our only notes in our audit. Actually had that in our audit every single year. So I'm actually very comfortable with it, and Roy seems to be comfortable with the idea, and it actually may, we have lots of ideas, but the idea eventually is to get back into the lawn care business ourselves and take it in-house and have our own groundskeeping staff to do that.
Maybe Brian can hire Roy to do some of the work.
So Right now, I'm going to ask a question that relates. And that is that I was thinking over the weekend while I was toiling outside doing my own landscaping. Could we give a stipend to a staff person at every building to organize and run volunteers to do community gardening at every building? Like, probably there's a bunch of parents all the time that would cycle through with their kids who might be interested in volunteering their services to, plant flowers and shrubs and things and maintain them and mulch them and, do the weeding, all the volunteer stuff that would be required. And I was thinking, we obviously do stipended positions for staff for doing different things in our schools, sports, etc. Could we stipend this? Because it may give a staff person who loves gardening and their school and their grounds the motivation to manage all that, because it takes time to manage volunteers, obviously, right? Because I continue to believe very strongly that when you live or go to a special place, whether it's your home or office or school, you just feel better. And when you feel better, you do better. You do better academically, professionally, etc. And that to have beautiful grounds in our buildings like forever, I think is a really, really important goal. But I don't see how we fund it. I mean, it's just really impossible to fund that kind of planting and weeding and maintaining on a local school budget. So that's my question. Could we do a stipended position to get a staff person to organize community volunteers for community gardens at each of our buildings?
Lauren, you're not thinking of flowers and things necessarily. You're thinking of fruits and veggies, or what are you thinking?
No, I'm thinking of perennials and plants like that, small bushes that are in flower beds at each of our buildings when people arrive and walk through. I mean, we obviously have things already, but I mean, we could do more. And
the answer is the board can establish a stipend in a position for that. Certainly, that's a board prerogative.
Yeah, the hard part about that is getting people to do it over the summer. And obviously, with the perennial gardens, most of the work is in the early spring when you're doing the weeding and the mulching and the dividing and all that. Because once the mulch is down, if it's thick enough, it should keep most things at bay. It also helps with irrigation.
Yep.
I mean, I'm certainly in favor of beautifying our buildings, our campuses. And I'd just like to see even just plant more trees, which, once they're in the ground, they don't really need much maintenance at all. Yeah.
One of the things that I've heard staff say repeatedly, and I worked with at least one staff member over at South School off and on over the last couple of years, is they really do want to have gardens and for like the fruits and vegetables and eating things, and that there's a lot of research actually into how integrating that into the curriculum is beneficial. And we can look down at Thomaston and see one way that you can do that. So I think if we were to do something like this, I think we should make it a little more comprehensive, because we have the staff who are interested in doing what you're talking about and in doing more, and have been trying to fit it into their schedules, and it doesn't quite work. I know at South School, there was also a conversation of having it in use over the summer when we have summer programs, particularly when we have special ed summer programs, that those can again be really fantastic learning opportunities for students, and of course, social emotional benefits and so forth. So I think it's an interesting idea. I don't think actually, Gerald, it would be as much of a hurdle to get volunteers. I think everything I hear is that there's so many people who want to volunteer, but the hurdle is us. The hurdle is not the volunteers.
Well, if there's such a huge cry for it, they should be contacting us, and I'm not really seeing that.
I will say that
just pause for a second before we get way too far down this road. Are we all done with the sports and fields con bid? Do we need to talk anything more about that?
I had a question about that. What, so Pete, we had when we talked to facilities, we had said that we were going to be buying equipment likely this year. So would we be buying equipment to make a change in that gardening or the mowing for next year? Or would we be able to buy that equipment this year?
We may not buy the equipment right now. I think we kind of, we went the bid process this way and offered it the way we did because we just didn't have the people capacity to do it ourselves. We've taken on we've actually taken on two of the schools ourselves. And so we have resurrected an 8,000 hour machine that we have in-house. And we're possibly going to buy a used 600 hour machine that I noticed the other day around the corner of my house that Steve is looking at tonight just to see if it's worth buying. But he's checked it out with he knows the owner, and it's a machine that's going to last a long time and would actually help us with Cushing and the middle school, which we've taken on to do ourselves this year.
Because we have some money in the budget for that. And apparently I think you mentioned last time we've had money in the budget and we keep putting it into the budget, but then we keep not using it. And then
we do, and I don't, I keep it in there because I want it. At some point, I do want to do that. What I didn't say is that part of my conversation with Roy is, an option, could be maybe we just buy his business out. I mean,
buy his equipment.
Buy his equipment. He's got trailers and I think he's got 7 large lawnmowers. He said he would keep one, but he may go to Union Farm and just have it appraised, and we'll come back and see if that makes sense for us to actually just get into that business, immediately.
What would the auditors think about that, though?
Oh, we would do it. We would do it above board. We wouldn't. We would.
Well, I'm not suggesting we wouldn't, but it does seem like if there's an issue with having an employee as a contractor, what are the issues of buying equipment from an employee?
As long as you do it an arm's length transaction, and there's not a problem with it.
Okay. So if we were to do that, what would we do with the contract or the bids that we just signed? Or that we just
we keep them on for a year. We'd buy them in anticipation of using them in future years.
I guess my concern is that I really don't like having that line item in there over and over again, because it just, we're not holding the money back for this purchase. So we're basically asking taxpayers to pay for it every single year. And I don't think that seems right. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Any money that's not spent would go right to the fund balance. Not
But
that we
we've been
have one right now.
overspending. We've been overspending. So that money is getting spent in different ways.
In past years, yeah. But that was a separate issue.
Right. I guess I'm not a fan of the idea that just because it's going to the general fund balance, it doesn't have an impact to taxpayers.
I think we've made decisions not to spend the money because we didn't have it.
But we budgeted for it, so we should have had it.
Budgeted for it. Well, when other things were going over budget, as they were, the money really wasn't there. You got to cut back somewhere. You got to make some decisions, and that's what we're doing. It's just not spending things that we even budgeted for.
All right, I'm now done with that conversation, Gerald.
If we do,
Sorry, that was abrupt. That really sounded rude, and it didn't. That was intended to be a transition, not a test.
if we are going to consider taking on our own lawn and field maintenance, then we do need to think about, instead of transporting machinery, just having a dedicated mower at Cushing makes a lot of sense. And so it's going to need a storage place, and there's going to be other tools and equipment rather than trying to tote the stuff all around all the time.
Well, that's been
time loading it up and unloading it, and
that's been the one of the issues. The other issue is staff. You can't hire staff right now, and who knows when it's going to change. And there is nobody who is willing to work and do these jobs right now. We are short-staffed in our building and grounds. We are short-staffed in our nutrition program. We are short-staffed everywhere across the district and everywhere across the districts that I have other, contacts in. Everybody is just trying to make do and get by with the staff they have.
Oh yeah, I'm hearing ads like Poland Springs is advertised for forklift drivers. $20 an hour, forklift driver.
Samoset's got a big banner up now in front of that contraption by VIP. Samoset's got a big, come in or go online. We're hiring every shift, every shift, every position.
Yeah, it's just nuts. It's really crazy. Okay. I think that's all. Anyone else? Doug, do you have anything to add?
I'd say the only thing I would say is, I don't think it's a great idea right now, myself. I think that, we have other priorities that I think are much more important than that,
Okay.
that I would want to put money into.
So Doug,
That's my thought.
yeah, so Doug thinks we have higher priorities than cutting our own grass. Basically, is that
agree.
about right, Doug?
Yes.
Okay.
I would agree.
Okay. Now, do we want to continue on with the talk about the volunteer gardens? Anything more to add to that?
It's just, it just eventually, I'd like it to consider it more, and to maybe at some point principals can ask for interest. That
I mean, I completely agree that we need to spruce up our buildings. And this is the first thing that people see, not even students and staff, but even people from other towns.
Yeah.
And, our fields are the same way. It's absolutely, I agree that we need to do something about it. So,
It seems like a good conversation to have around contract time, because that's when we add stipends, or that's when we negotiate stipends anyway. So if we're going to add one, it makes sense to talk about it holistically, because otherwise the danger is we don't know what the overall costs are or things like that in relation to other costs. So I'd recommend we table it, I suppose, until we get to contracts, but then bring it up, because I do think it's something definitely worth talking more about.
yes, that's not to say that the principals and other staff can't start talking about it on their own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I agree with tabling it, but yeah, let's start talking and see what, if there's interest out there.
I did have one comment that I forgot now. I've just come to me about the sports fields, and that's irrigation. That's always an issue, especially at the soccer field at OMS. It gets rock hard in the summer because it doesn't get any rain, or in the years where there isn't very much rain. And there's no real way to irrigate that field. There's no real way to irrigate this baseball and softball diamonds. I don't know what happens at Wascott. I don't think that gets irrigated at all. It's something down the road that we should think about, is how to keep these fields nice and ready for use. The field hockey field, of course, is too wet, and the sort of the nature of Maine. We played at Camden on Sunday morning on their field hockey field, and it was great. And it was it's irrigated. I mean, it makes a huge difference.
You mean it's built-in irrigation, right?
Even just a sprinkler, even if you just put a sprinkler out there to have someone moving around. But again, it's summertime, and who's going to be around to do that? And where's the water come from?
Because I'm thinking of those big industrial sprinklers, and I think it's doable, but what you just said is true. Where does the water come from? Who's going to do it?
Well, we did it last year at the high school because we had all that construction being finished up. So we had the staff working the summer.
Yeah.
We had a moving sprinklers around all year round, all summer long.
Okay. Next up.
There is nothing on the audit right now. I thought I'd have something by today to share, but it's almost done. I'll let you know. I'll send you a draft when I get that.
I'm sorry. How much was the lawn and sports field bid?
63,000.
And that's for the entire year. I mean, obviously they don't do much in the winter, but
The calendar year.
yeah.
And how much is it normally?
We budgeted 75,000 for it.
So we have 12,000 for equipment.
Well, if we've done our negotiating right, we actually we're contemplating this, and this is I haven't even talked to John about this yet. He's willing to give us 3 years at 55,000 a year.
In that case, we definitely don't need equipment though. I mean,
But then we had money for it.
that's where I think we need to make a decision because
Well,
I don't feel comfortable putting both of those in the budget. I think we need to fish or cut bait or whatever the phrase is.
Well, part of
And
that,
by Thursday, so we can reuse it.
let's see, so I sent you, no, this afternoon when I got them, the preliminary budget documents for Thursday night,
Yep.
the warrants. The budget proposed is pretty much the same budget that we've been working with since John recommended it. The change, you'll see, I don't know if you look at the detail, this is actually $300,000 less in the general fund budget. But that money was separated out based on the recommendation of the attorney and based on what the DOE is doing statewide with other districts into its own article. So you'll see, if you look at the warrant and notice of elections, there's an Article 2 that raises that $300,000 separately. So the voters vote on that separate from the budget, as they do the adult ed program in Article 3.
And what is that for? I didn't have a chance to look at the article stuff or the warrant stuff.
Article, which one? So
So you said that the 300,000 is being raised separately. So what does that look like?
it says, shall the RSU be authorized to raise and appropriate $300,000 for the school nutrition program with authorization to expend any additional incidental or miscellaneous receipts?
Okay, so we're basically just shifting those funds.
We're just going to raise it directly into that fund.
Okay. You've been talking about doing that for years, so.
It's the same
Yeah, but now-
$300,000 that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, it's the same money. It just goes in there more directly. It's
Is that its own reserve fund then? Well, actually, it's an expenditure
Really?
fund, so it's its own.
it goes right into the into our nutrition fund, which is called an enterprise fund because it's really it's its own profit and loss center. And there's theoretically there's private funds that go into it, but not recently. Article 3 is our adult ed program, which is pretty much identical to last year. There's no change in the local share. Article 4 is a cost center transfer. So as you know, the school board has the authorization to move money from budget articles up to 5% of the article to another article if it needs to. If you have to move more than 5%, the legal way of doing that is you have to go to referendum and have the public do that. The DOE has recognized a lot of things this year or last year that never happens. So they're suggesting that this new article be written that allows the school board to transfer in excess of 5% if necessary between articles. So based on the recommendation of the attorneys, we added that article as well.
And that has no impact on the bottom line.
No, you can't, you can never go, you still can't go over the bottom line. That still needs,
Let's make sure that's clear. Yeah.
yeah.
Is
And
that
that's it. That's
permanent or one time? Sorry.
1 year. It's just for the year. So it's one of those things, until they legislate that, it will be a year after year. Article 5 is our capital reserve fund. You know, this is and these assume that we actually have fund balance to transfer into these things, but shall the school board be authorized to transfer up to $100,000 from available fund balance to the capital reserve fund and expend $50,000 from said reserve fund for unanticipated minor capital projects. And that's just something that we've had in most of our budgets. I don't know if we're going to be able to put that money in there, but we do have $65,000 in that. And I wanted to allow us to have the ability to spend that if the board chooses to spend that. Again, these are still require board authorization to spend those reserve funds.
You give an example of a minor capital project,
It could
like
be,
replacing some doors that go bad or something.
it could be doors, it could be a small roof repair,
Black mold at South School.
boiler, yeah, yeah.
That
Right.
might not be minor.
Oh, fair enough. It's
Nothing
minor
that-
if you count like under each window.
Clabbered, yeah.
Nothing that adds to the useful life of the building. Article 6 establishes a new special education reserve fund. Shall the school board be authorized to establish a special education reserve fund to pay unexpected one-time special education costs and transfer up to $100,000 from available fund balances to said reserve fund? Again, this is just if the funds, if we do have funds available to do so and you choose to do so, this is just, again, just to set that fund up on our books.
So looking at the contingencies in the budget, we've actually budgeted 125 for that. So that's more than we can actually put in there.
The rest would still go to the general fund balance, and we can move it later on. If we get to the point where we actually have some fund balance to do that, we can actually think about moving more money than that. But I'm not even sure that we'll have enough money to put these amounts in there. I just want to be prepared to, if we could. I'd like to have them set up.
Wait, what do you mean? Because I mean, when I'm looking at the budget, we're actually setting aside a certain amount of money in contingency.
You still need to have fund balance. You still have to have money in the savings account. Because we still have a negative fund balance.
So these contingencies that we're setting up here. Okay, well, I guess I thought that you had said that you were expecting a normal fund, or you were expecting a zero fund balance
I
at the end
am
of the year.
I am crossing my fingers, and I'm watching this. I've got 2 more months before this year's over. And yes, if you look at the financials, we are in a place where I think that we're going to have maybe even a positive budgetary fund balance, but I'm not sure how much we'll have to transfer and actually restrict, or we want to restrict.
Well, right. But okay, so in other words, if something explodes and we lose that money, the money that we're budgeting for these contingencies just goes to the general fund instead of to the contingencies?
That's next year's money. So the articles that we put into FY23 budget would move fund balance. The fund balance isn't established until the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, so
Yeah, I think you're a little confused here. We're not budgeting this money there. We're creating like a pot for the money to go in if we have extra.
right, but I guess what I'm saying is that we are budgeting in this year, we're budgeting to put money into contingency funds.
In fiscal
No.
22, fiscal
Yeah.
22.
And only if there's extra, only if there's a fund extra in the fund balance. So we're not putting this money anywhere. We're allowing ourselves to move money into it. Does that make
Right.
sense?
So I recognize there are two separate things here. So the article is simply allowing it. But what I'm saying is we're budgeting, we are taking,
Well, those contingencies. Yeah.
right, we're taking that money. So I guess I'm confused about where that money is going. If we take $125,000 for the special ed contingency, but we can only put 100,000 into the contingency fund.
That's assuming that we don't spend any of the contingency.
So the
Right.
contingency, so the contingency is a tool that we have starting in July. So from July 21 to June 22, that money is that line is a tool for costs that come up. At the end of fiscal 22, and if that money is not spent, or any money is not spent, then we'll be able to move that into the reserve fund or more. And we'd also then authorize the spending of that money in the same article. But that wouldn't happen until next year's budget process, until the end of fiscal 22, when we actually have And you
Okay,
can-
process
yeah.
wise, that makes sense. Thank you. I do still want to talk about the numbers because I think we're putting too much in contingencies. So I do want to have a conversation about that.
Is the idea that we're going to build these reserve funds up since this isn't, so like next year we hope to add more, and I'm sure there's like a target number that we want to hit.
Yeah, and I don't have that right now.
Yeah.
And
John
I-
did mention
But that's the
$500,000
idea.
for special ed.
I think there's, as the budget, a percentage of that of the article, if the special ed is going to be 7 million, do you want to keep 5%? I think that's what this committee can come up with those benchmarks. How much do we want to keep in these how much do we want to keep in these funds? Because it's restricted money. You can't just spend special ed money on capital improvements. That's why we're asking the public to allow the board to transfer that money into a restricted fund from the unrestricted fund.
Article 7.
Article 7 is to begin to put money back that we have had and we've spent down in prior years when fuel was, fuel is just one of those things that is hard to budget for because it's all over the board in terms of price wise. So we have a fuel cost stabilization fund. We've spent it down to zero. So this just allows us to transfer $50,000 back to that fund if there are available funds to do so. And then Article 8, Article 9 are the articles for Midco School of Technology.
And we've seen a reduction in what we what we owe, but there's a better word for it.
We've seen a small reduction in what we owe, but we also have paying a larger share of the whole budget. The net decrease, part of it's the bond payment going down, the interest going down. Part of it's because they receive more subsidy.
Yeah, that was, yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Doug, do you have any comments about this?
No, I'm thinking that, I'm concerned about the taxpayer, but with Rockland's paying for sure. And I know we're adding things that, some of these things we need, and I'm not saying we don't need them. I'm not so sure this is important. That's comment number one.
Now, hold on. So Doug's concerned about that we might be putting in things that we don't necessarily need to this year. Do you have an example of that, Doug? Doug says the contingencies are one.
I mean, I don't think it's not a good idea. I'm just looking at what's going on in the economy, what's going on.
He likes the idea of them, but he just doesn't think that this is the year to do them. Anything to say?
Well, I want to have that conversation as well. In fact, I want to actually remove. Oh, were you talking to us or Doug? Sorry.
No, I'm talking. That's just, if it's okay with you, Doug, want to go with that? So, if it's okay with you, let's have Chelsea add to that. Yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah, I agree with Doug. I mean, I think I've definitely long been a favor of having some contingency funds, and I think that we do need to start building that up. But really, I think the number is too high, especially because we're funding it because our health insurance benefits costs came in lower. And I think instead of just saying, oh, well, let's just move that line item, I think we should not be increasing the cost to taxpayers. So I definitely want to see some of it go. I'm actually more confused now than when we started because I feel like I had the impression that we were doing 100,000 for capital improvements and 125 for special ed. And then I guess what I was thinking of as food service is actually what is considered the district. If we're going to be at a zero fund balance, And we're also expecting to get a pocket of money from the Apple devices. I feel like we're in a better financial position than we've been. And I think this is the time to start building on that, but I don't think we need to have quite the influx. So I definitely want to
So
see that
Let
drop.
me just address the financial position of the, so there's two fund there's two fund balances.
Yeah.
There's the budgetary fund balance, which is kind of how much money is in the bank in your savings account. And there is the gap fund balance. The balance, what you owe at the end of the year if you were to close up shop.
Mhm.
Our gap fund balance at the end of fiscal 19 was negative $4 million. 2.6 million of that is our accrued summer salary. That's what we pay in the summer to our teachers because they have a September to August contract. So the one thing that's reported in the audit is the gap fund balance. That's the fund balance. You know, when the state says that you can only have a fund balance of 3% of your budget, they're referring to gap. So in order for us, we're $5.2 million away from that right now in terms of where we would be in terms of a good fund balance from the state's perspective.
What I need to,
The other part of our fund balance, and this is really important, is that a budgetary fund balance of 0 does not give us any ability to cash flow. So the way we spend money is not linear. The way we receive money is linear, and we get the exact same amount of money every single month from our towns and cities. But our cash flow is not like that. And in order to have the ability to self-fund our cash flow and to be responsible and not borrow money in order to cover some of that cash flow needs, having a fund balance, a gap fund balance that's at least 0 or somewhere closer to where somewhere, less non-negative.
so are you saying, because I think the confusion here is that when I ask the question, I think I'm getting different answers. So one of the things that would be very helpful is to have what you just said in writing so that we actually see what all of those accounts are. So does that mean we're still like $1.25 million in the hole?
We are at the end of 2019 and similar to 2020, a little bit better. Our gap fund balance is negative $4 million.
And
Out of
that's not cash flow. That's an actual deficit.
That includes two pieces primarily. Our accrued summer salaries, so the amount that we are allowed to raise in a future budget, but it's still a liability on June 30th. And right now, because there's 5 payrolls in July and August, that number has been inflated to about 2.6 million. It's not usually that high, but that includes 5 payrolls. The balance between that number and the negative 4 million is our actual budgetary fund balance. That's really negative. So if we cleaned up all our liabilities and cashed in all of our receivables, every bill was paid, we would theoretically have a negative bank balance of 1.4 million.
And when you say you're hoping at the end of the fiscal year we'll be back to 0, that's what you're referring
That's
to.
the piece that I want to get back to, but that doesn't help me when I try to cash flow and project cash, especially when we have huge bond payments coming up in November, and we generally have this like this past year and then next year too, we'll have 14 payrolls in the first 6 months of the year, and that's kills your cash early on, and it's only now that we're actually starting to see for me it's a little bit of relief that there's money in the bank and start accumulating that money so we can pay it back. But having these contingencies to me, for me, has another purpose. And that is if we can do our best not to spend these contingencies, like we're doing our best not to spending things that we don't have to, keeping positions open that we notice we don't need, for example, or not just filling things because it's budgeted, not just spending things because they're budgeted. But to me, being responsible in our spending and allowing us to put that money back into our fund balance helps everybody. I mean, the other thing that we could have done is when we overspent our budgets, we could have just gone to the taxpayers and asked them to pay it. That's one methodology of doing it. We didn't do that, and we're trying to do it in a way that doesn't have a huge, shock to the taxpayer. And freezing the budget this year, I think, has been a huge, help in getting us back. I never thought we would get back to a zero budgetary fund balance by the end of this year. I just didn't think it would happen. And I'm hoping that it might even be a little better than that, but I don't know. It's still 2 months left, and I just don't know what's going to come down the road.
And you're not counting the money that we're getting from the Apple devices at all?
I'm not, and I can't right now. I've thought about doing that,
No, I think that's the right move.
and
But I also think we should think about that when we're determining the number of contingencies. So going
I
back
think-
to the
But
contingency.
I think that's a next year. I think that's a next year conversation. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I really get it. But I think having the fund balance and having a solid fund balance, again, one, because we have to, two, because it helps cash flow, and three, because it allows us in future budget years, when there is an increase that we think is too much, it allows us to put some of that money and stabilize the tax impact.
Which is
Exactly.
why we're in this problem.
And we
Exactly.
can't do that right now. And that's we've had our hands tied. When we had that big increase in fiscal 20, that was because we had been using fund balance. And at that point, fund balance that we didn't even have, because we budgeted using fund balance that we thought we were going to have that we didn't have. And that got us into a double whammy that all of a sudden, not only did our special ed costs and our employee costs go up phenomenally, astronomically, we had a huge cut in revenue because we couldn't self-fund these things. We actually had to say we can't put this money back into the budget and help the tax impact because we don't have it. And I want to be to the point, and you notice that there is no budget stabilization fund because I tried, but the lawyer said I really couldn't do that.
Well, and I feel like that's actually not how we should be using reserve funds, because it does end up artificially affecting the tax rate in ways that are not sustainable necessarily. But let's go back to the contingencies. I would definitely like to see the contingencies lowered. I'm not going to advocate for getting rid of them, but I would like to see them lowered. And so the question is how we want to handle that. I can make an amendment on Thursday. I'm happy to do that. I'm also happy if we want to do that some other way, but I would like to see the contingencies lowered. I haven't quite figured out a number. But I definitely want to see 50 to 100,000 less. And it sounds like Doug wants, I'm actually curious if Doug has a number.
Oh, do you have a number that you'd like to see the contingencies go to?
No, but I think I agree with Chelsea. I think some are pretty high, like special ed was an example of that. I don't have the paperwork in front of me, to be honest with you, Gerald. I would like to ask the superintendent a question about Thursday night.
Okay, well, yep, Cal, I'll keep that in mind. Doug doesn't have a number either, but he just thinks that they're too high, especially the special ed one.
I could promise you that the unknowns between now and September in terms of what our vendors are going to do to our rates on things, they're not going to go down. And I talked, and I know that we haven't gotten an official number from our pre-K program at Penquist, but that could be $50,000 more than we budgeted in a second. You know, we were able to negotiate down this year, but I don't even know what that's going to be. So, you know, obviously, I think the process would have to be on Thursday. I'm not sure that.
I'll give an opinion if I could.
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to hear opinions.
My opinion is, and I've said this for some time now, is that special education is a huge concern, and it's a huge issue, particularly in the school system. We spend a lot on special education. It doesn't take much. A couple special needs students move in who have really extreme needs, and we've got to have a placement for them out of district. There goes your 125,000 and then some right then. So the district really needs to start thinking about building up a reserve for special education. There are huge problems out there right now, which we don't even know, because this is a really strange time. Our enrollment is really wonky. We have students who are not attending. And I have this sneaking suspicion that we're going to have needs rise up that we don't even know about yet. So if I had my way, and I'm not recommending this, if I had my way, I'd put $500,000 in contingency tomorrow, because that's how much I'm concerned about that. So I don't believe 125,000 is too much at all. You may disagree with me. I can understand that, and I certainly respect that. But that's just my opinion.
We've already heard.
I'd like, actually, can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
So John, I mean, this is why I was actually really surprised when we presented the, what are we calling it, COVID Tier 1 plan, because if we are worried about those concerns, I think the place to be budgeting for that is in the COVID budget, and also thinking about like social workers, special ed, and things like that. And so I'm not sure why we're putting all of that onus on the expenditure budget.
Because I can't create projects that I don't know that I have the need for. When you do the COVID funding, you have to describe how that money is going to be used, not how it might be used, how it's going to be used. And I can't do a set aside of 125,000 or 200,000 and just say, well, it might be used in special education. I can't do that.
Okay, so that makes sense. But the thing is, we're not going to be spending all of it by the time the fall semester hits. So we can then request that money, correct? If we have a tangible need, we could then make that request.
If we identify the need in time and had the funding still available, I suppose that's true.
And so I think what we need to do is make sure that we're leaving a little bit of room where we can maneuver in those things, in those COVID funds, rather than saying this needs to be on the taxpayer, because those kinds of concerns are explicitly COVID concerns, and they really should be things that we are covering from those funds if we actually have them. So my understanding is that we're not committing to spending all of the money immediately. So I feel like that I certainly wouldn't cut all of the contingency for the special ed. I think that 100,000 for special ed is a good number. I'm really thinking cutting a little bit from, I mean, the allocation is however you want to do it, but the way I'm conceiving of it is cutting a little bit from the facilities, because we have this pocket of money that we keep talking about with the equipment in particular. I think there's a little bit of room that we could apply some of that to contingencies. And the district contingency. I mean, I don't understand why we're putting $100,000 in there when we've got 350 coming in from Apple devices. I think
we can't spend that. We can't spend that money if there's not an expense line to go with it.
But the thing with
it goes into the general fund.
It goes into the undesignated fund balance.
which is what we're talking about.
But it can't be spent.
But to Chelsea's point, it's just, so the reason that you have a contingency is to address unknown needs that crop up. And so if we're able to use some of the COVID money to do these things, then the contingency doesn't get spent. And that's the whole point. So all we're doing is putting the money there in case we need it. And if we don't need it, it doesn't get spent. It's not like it's going to go somewhere. And that's why we're creating these other reserve funds, is so that we can put that money into next year and the following year's budgets. And
Well, that's the
whole
point I
reason.
haven't gotten to yet, which is that this is
So
a year.
let me finish. I mean, this
Yeah,
is
sorry, I
important.
thought you
So,
were.
so you're talking as if these contingencies are money that are already spent or going to be spent, and that's not the case. They're just there in case we need them, and if we don't need them, they don't get spent.
I
And
disagree.
that's a
with
really important thing. And it is, as you said, it's like if we can use this COVID money in the future, or the iPad buyback stuff for other things, then we're not going to be spending that money. And we can either return it to the taxpayers, or we can put it in these reserve funds that will be used later to make sure that we're not coming back to the taxpayers with unexpected increases in the tax rate.
So this is a challenging tax year for a lot of people. If you look at particularly Rockland, you've got a lot of people whose houses are going up 30, 40, 50, even more % in their taxes. But we also have a lot of service workers who've had their incomes cut, if not eliminated. And I'm not actually saying, Gerald, that I'm not expecting us to spend this money. My issue is not spending it. My issue is putting it in the expenditure budget, because I think that this is an easy place, because we're funding this money from quote unquote savings that we were expecting to pay for health insurance. This is an easy way where we can split the difference, where we can lower our tax rate slightly as at the same time that we still actually start to create these savings accounts. I'm not saying let's not do them. I'm saying let's have them at a more reasonable amount that balances our responsibility as the taxpayers with.
So if we cut $25,000 out of a contingency, that's like 0.1% of our budget. That's going to have no
Excellent.
impact.
So
It's going to have zero impact on the tax. It's not going to have any.
But Gerald, every single time you say that, if we start adding up all of
know.
those very small numbers, they do actually equal something. And $50,000 to $100,000
Okay.
is a teacher.
I think let's move on, but come up with a proposal on Thursday.
I'm going to make an amendment. It's already done.
Well, you're proposing an amendment. You're not going to make one. You're going to propose an amendment that we'll vote on. Hold on, Doug. But yeah, let's do that Thursday. Work out with Pete and John how it actually needs to happen, because I have no idea.
You just propose an amendment. I don't think it's
Yeah,
complicated.
well, I assume that that someone will move the budget, and then you'll make a motion to amend it. So we'll take it from. Okay, Doug, you have a question?
First, I want to say I agree with Chelsea and
Doug agrees with both of us, by the way.
secondly, on Thursday, I
Yes.
know the superintendent has a list of about, I think, one resignation and maybe 2 or 3 retirements. There's like 12 people, positions, half that he wants to add. The question I just wanted to ask is, those positions that he's adding, in addition to the people that are resigning and retiring, it's because there's a wide spectrum, like janitors, ed techs, teachers, all that. Are they all going to be paid for money?
All right, okay, hold on. So John, Doug thinks that you're going to be proposing some new hires on Thursday, as well as the resignations and the retirements
In the COVID budget.
in the COVID budget, Doug. So that answers your question.
Right, so they're all going to be COVID except for the people that resign or retire.
Well, are we going to be advertising these jobs that are these four jobs that are going to be, John?
The only new positions are in the COVID budget.
Okay.
So
The only new positions are in the COVID budget. There'll be no new positions in the general budget.
Okay. And the last question I wanted to ask him, he doesn't have to answer it, he doesn't know, I guess, no. On the principal at the middle school, I know we talked about this year's budget, increasing it quite a bit, primarily because of healthcare. But I was wondering, is he looking to hire in-house first, or is he going to advertise the position?
The question is about the retirement of the principal at the middle school, whether that's an in-house hire first or it was advertised.
There's no such thing. We've posted it and we're going to be conducting interviews.
It's already posted.
Okay, thank you.
Can I follow up on one of Doug's questions?
Yep.
So John,
It is 6:45, so let's be wary about the time.
yeah, well, I also have a lot of questions about the non-aligned staff, and unfortunately, I'm going to need. We'll get to that later. So John, I noticed that the development director is in the COVID position. When we talked in the last meeting about the list of positions that was going to be permanent, we didn't mention that. So for Thursday, can we make sure to have an updated list of what positions will be permanent beyond the COVID funding?
Yeah, we have that and we're going to have it ready at the board meeting. So we'll show you all that.
Okay, can you make sure we get that info in advance? Because I'd like to look at it
Yep.
before the meeting.
We can do that.
Thank you. Okay.
Anything else on the budget that will be presented to the board on Thursday? Okay.
One quick question, Gerald,
Yep.
sorry.
Okay.
When we talked about the COVID budget a couple of weeks back, and then someone asked the question about finishing the high school windows, and there was that long pause in the room, because I know you guys know how I feel about it, but down the road, do you have like thoughts about how we just got to get it done one day?
I have got to budget and plan for getting us back in person 5 days a week in all of our schools as a top priority. And then there are secondary and tertiary priorities. So I've never forgotten that. And the board needs to understand that we're going to be flexible and adaptive with how we apply for and spend these funds. But my number one goal is we've got to figure out and get our schools opened up again in the fall. So yeah, Lauren, that's never out of my mind, but it's not primary. It's not even secondary at this point.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And I agree with you. I respect all that. I just want to, down the road at some point, we got to get it done. So thank you.
I do have one more question about the budget. And again, this is something that I'm happy to have you answer on Thursday, so long as I get the data before that. But Pete, you talked about add backs, and is that term specific enough that is that a real term? Can we use that term?
Add back?
Apparently not. Okay. So you use the word somewhere in this pile of notes. I have how you defined it, but I don't. I'm just going to paraphrase. Add backs, which are costs that we temporarily pull out of a budget and then we add them back later.
Huh.
Well, let's make it a new phrase. So add backs.
So
Can you
temporarily put it out? Oh, like, so, okay, so for example, we
Professional development.
We eliminated 2 positions, one at South School and one, I remember that we eliminated 2 teaching positions a couple of years ago because the class sizes didn't warrant that. And we asked the principals to come up with those reductions. Yet the following year, they weren't sustainable cuts. They weren't a system. So yes, so we did have to add those positions back, and we tried not to do that. So that's why that kind of came up with the whole idea, make sure that, both cuts and additions, identify them as one that you're going to sustain or one that you can't sustain, that you could just temporarily offset the budget or,
But through the budget process, we always do that because school populations shift and things change, and sometimes you need a position and then you don't need it.
Well, that's why I think when I'm thinking of the add backs, I'm not necessarily thinking of positions per se, because John's right. Those are things that you are always going to be in flux. I'm thinking about things like the $100,000 that we didn't budget for in this budget, or 21 and 22 for professional development. I'm wondering if we have buses in the budget and things like that. So those are things that we know we're going to have to add back into the budget. So what I want to know is what that number is going to be.
Well, honestly, some of those things we have not added back, so I guess it is a good term,
Yeah, see,
this year.
it's your term.
So, I don't know, then maybe it's not a good term, but it's a term. Though there are things like professional development, there are things like field trips that we have not added back this year. And part of having the contingency is if we had to fund those from the general fund budget would be for things like that. That's, I think why, again, I look more at the bottom line and the increase of the bottom line than actual a line that might be inflated or a line that might be too low, because then I rationalize the other things like field trips, for example, as I was going through that the other day, realizing that, is there a way that I could justify field trips in fiscal 22 being kind of COVID related? I think in many of the field trips that we do choose to get kids off site or to Kelmscott or to Hurricane Island, could be loosely tied to COVID, and maybe we do have an opportunity to use COVID funds for that, because we did hold back some of that money for things like that. But what if we could? What if we can't? What if we really need to use our own or choose to use our own money for that? What if we are in a position where we have to send 2 buses to every single sporting event because of what's going on, next year? To me, those add backs that we haven't added back yet are the things that I'm concerned about, and for me personally, the contingencies help me sleep a little bit better, having that at least, and having the ability to ask the board to move that money to the article that we might need it in.
My concern with the add backs is different. So what the reason I want to know the number is because I am trying to figure out, well, for starters, because we're talking about how our budget is in line with normal budgets. It's a 4% increase, but we've also taken out some things. So we're not really comparing apples and oranges. But the other concern that I have is that we are going to have to add those back post-COVID. And so I'm trying to figure out, and Pete, I'm assuming you've done 3 to 5 year projections for what our budget's going to look like post-COVID with all of these new costs that we're maintaining.
Well, I think that's why I look at the bottom line. To me, some of those contingencies are placeholders for some of those add backs.
That's an interesting
the budget's there. I think this is the bottom line budget, I think, would be the appropriate budget in a normal school year next year. So if COVID didn't exist, this budget would get us through that.
But what about like the Ash Point? Because that's not just that's not just COVID related. Those are needs that we have in general.
Those are funded by, title, we had a title grant funding one of those positions. Those are classroom reduction grants that are addressing some of those issues too. So
is that going to come back to the taxpayer in 3 to 5 years? Because you phased it in to the expenditure budget.
Which one, like the teachers?
Yeah.
That's part and parcel of what we're going to show you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll save the rest of my questions on that until then. But I do want to make sure that any add back that we are making sure that we're not we haven't reduced our budget in a way that we are going to have to go back and pull it back in. Because I am a little worried about 100,000 professional development plus 100,000 in buses. The contingency is a good point, though. That might offset all of those.
To me, that's the bottom line. Why I didn't just take those out, because I didn't want to have that shock later on. Is there are those things that we don't have, and to me, that's what. Again, I think as a bottom line budget, it's a fair and accurate representation of what we need to be spending in a normal year. And
does that mean, though, if our health insurance had come in at what you budgeted, we would be over 4%?
We wouldn't have all those abilities.
Because if we're just sort of offsetting them, it does still suggest that we've got a little bit of a higher budget than 4%.
I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing, I don't know. It's things that, I mean, every single day, if I try to adjust this budget every day when I get something new information, it would drive me crazy. And last year or 2 years ago.
Well,
I
it did drive us crazy, yes.
2 years ago when I did it, because it was like, would hit something and it would change every budget.
Yeah.
I lost my history.
Okay, I'm done with general transition, not rude. I'm done with general. I'm just really tired. I'm done with
and
general questions. I do still have questions about the non-aligned stuff.
so Gerald, I still have to do work on one of my other jobs tonight, so we can wrap it up pretty soon. That'd be cool.
Can we table that to another discussion, or create another meeting for that? Or I'm happy to talk about.
Well, the problem is with the non-aligned staff is I have a lot of questions about this, and that's, unfortunately, this week is really busy for me. I only have school board time tonight and Thursday night. And I asked for this information back in February, and then I asked for it again 3 weeks ago. And part of that was so that I would have time to talk about it if I needed to. But now we're sort of at crunch time, and I still have a lot of questions about this. So yeah, I understand it's 7 o'clock, but I got this information yesterday and I requested it in February. So
What's the pleasure of the committee?
I'm leaving at 7. Sorry, it's a busy week for me too.
Can we, there's no way to take it up before Thursday?
I have meetings tomorrow night, and this week, it's one thing if I can plan in advance. That's why I asked 3 weeks ago for this information so that we could do that. But last minute, no.
Well, it doesn't sound like Pete's going to be here to answer your questions after 7.
Yeah, I understand that. Well, I will
Is there
ask
a way that
them
you
on
can put
Thursday.
them in, is there a way you can put them in writing tonight and send them to us?
No, I will ask them on Thursday.
Okay.
So, and Pete, can you send that document out to the entire board so that they'll see it?
Sure.
Okay.
Anything else that we can wrap up in 2 minutes? I guess there is one last thing. Do we want to think about when we can meet in person? Or
I
is
think we
everyone,
should continue these meetings on Zoom because they're more accessible.
You know,
People
I
can
think
watch
that
them.
that's one of the realities of our future, is that a lot of things we're just going to keep doing on Zoom because it works better.
Yeah.
And I have no problem doing these meetings on Zoom. It's really quite easy. It saves a lot of drive time, and I think it's easier on our staff. But John and Pete, should jump in and say what you think. But I don't feel disconnected anymore. I'm so used to Zoom. I don't feel disconnected from you all. I feel completely connected. So I think, we want to be, together as a school board for our monthly meeting and our workshop. But committee meetings, I don't know. I'm pretty good with these.
Well, one thing, so after the governor finally rescinds the executive order, we're going to have to go back to in-person school board meetings.
Yeah, but not these though.
No, committee meetings, as long as we make them public.
Yeah.
We can do this. And
how do you feel about that, Doug?
So obviously I couldn't get on with the password tonight. Other than the technology challenge of my ignorance or whatever, I would say, I'm fine with Zoom. The only thing, we don't get any public input.
Okay, so Doug says he's fine with Zoom even when he can't get on. But he also says that we're not getting any public input this way, but then I'll counter that. No one ever comes to our meetings anyway. So it's if the public wants to join these meetings, they can.
Except I've had at least one member of the public say she had trouble joining them. So we do need to work that out, but this way we
Well,
see cats.
Well, this brings up a broader point: is how much public participation do we need to provide at committee meetings? And that's not for right now, but yeah, okay, something to think about. So I guess I'm okay meeting by Zoom too, because I'm just right here in my house. Even though central office is just a 2-minute walk away, I don't have to make the long drive like Lauren does, and I know it's at the end of the world.
End of the world, man. End of the world.
Because I have a
I love
job
it.
site, right? I have a job site right there. It is at the end of the world.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody. Chelsea, sorry we can't get your questions in tonight, but we'll be taking them on Thursday, and also have your amendment ready for that. Anything else to add? No. All right. Well, we're good to wrap it up. Thanks everybody. Pete,
Thank
wanna
you.
shut us down?
See ya.